am a plain woman, but I have dignity and will. Jane Eyre is often remembered as a romance, but at its heart, it is the story of a woman who insists on living as herself. Jane Eyre is an orphan raised in cruelty and neglect. At her aunt's house, she is treated as a burden. At boarding school, she endures poverty, discipline, and loss. Yet Jane refuses to surrender her sense of self. Quietly and persistently, she learns to protect her inner dignity. As an adult, Jane works as a governess and meets Mr. Rochester. Despite differences in class, wealth, and temperament, a deep connection forms between them. But for Jane, love must never mean self-erasure. It must be based on equality, not dependence. On her wedding day, Jane discovers a devastating truth. Rochester is already married. Rather than compromise her moral integrity, Jane chooses solitude and hardship. This is the moral center of the novel. Jane values self-respect over passion. Over time, Jane gains independence and security. When she reunites with Rochester, she does so as an equal, free to choose, not compelled by need. Her final union is not fate, but the result of conscious choice. Though written in the 19th century, Jane Eyre speaks powerfully to modern readers. It asks, how much of ourselves are we willing to give up for love, security, or social approval? Now let's explore how Jane Eyre's choices offer insight into modern identity, healthy boundaries in relationships, and forms of love that preserve self-respect in contemporary life.
Okay, so let's talk about Jane Eyre, a novel from 1847 about a poor, plain governess. I mean, it doesn't exactly sound like a page-turner, right? But here's the thing. Nearly 200 years later, this book still feels, well, dangerous. So what's the deal? In this explainer, we're going to figure out exactly why this story wasn't just another classic, it was a full-blown revolution.
I mean, just listen to this line. I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. Wow. This isn't just some pretty prose, you know? It's a declaration of independence. She says this to Mr. Rochester, the man she loves, but who also kind of wants to own her. And with those words, she's not just speaking for herself. Nope. She's lighting a fuse that would just keep on burning for generations.
And let me tell you, people saw that fuse and they thought it was a bomb. Victorian society was totally shaken. Critics called the novel anti-Christian and were genuinely afraid it would start a revolution, right in their own living rooms. One critic even said the book represented a true revolution, pretty much warning that it could inspire a mutiny in every single home. Can you imagine?
So that brings us to the big question, right? What is it about the story of this poor, supposedly plain governess that's still so revolutionary, even now? What's the secret sauce that makes it continue to challenge us and pull us in? Well, let's dive in and break it all down.
All right, first things first, we have to talk about Jane, because she wasn't just another character in a book. She was something totally new, a kind of heroine that honestly threatened the entire social order.
You have to understand, this was the total opposite of the typical Victorian heroine. Jane isn't quiet, she's not submissive, and she is definitely not perfect. Early reviewers actually called her an unregenerate and undisciplined spirit. Why? Because she had the nerve to show feelings like anger and passion right out in the open. She just refuses to be anyone's possession. She actually demands that Rochester, this super wealthy guy way above her in society, see her as his absolute equal, not just an employee, an equal. That was huge.
So where did this radical spirit come from? Well, it wasn't just born out of nowhere. It was forged in the fire of some serious hardship. You can actually track her whole life as a journey through 5 key places, and each one plays a huge part in shaping the woman she becomes.
And you can see the whole journey laid out right here. It starts at Gateshead, with a really cruel childhood as an orphan nobody wants. Then she's off to Lowood School, which is super harsh, but it's where she gets an education and finds her first real friend. After that, it's Thornfield Hall. This is where she works as a governess and falls into this intense, passionate love story that's filled with secrets. Those secrets force her to run, and she ends up at Moor House with nothing. But that's where everything flips. She finds family she never knew she had, and, this is the game changer, her own money. That fortune, that financial independence, is what lets her go back to Ferndean. But this time, she's not some poor governess. She's his equal, totally in charge of her own life.
Okay, so her personal journey is incredible, but it's all happening against this backdrop of some seriously scandalous stuff for the Victorian era. See, Brontë wasn't just writing a love story. Oh no, she was writing a blistering critique of her entire society.
And at the heart of it all is this massive choice, basically boiled down to two very different men. On one side, you've got Edward Rochester. He's all passion, offering this intense, maybe even dangerous love between equals. He's your classic Byronic hero, dark, brooding, but with a secret vulnerable side. Then you have St. John Rivers. He's the complete opposite, all cold, rigid principle. He offers her a life of duty as his wife, but with zero love. It would mean sacrificing who she is for his goals. So her choice isn't just about which guy to pick, it's about what kind of life is actually worth living.
Now, to really get why this book was so shocking, you have to get the genre. It's a Gothic novel. Think spooky old mansions, mysterious happenings, maybe a ghost or two. Brontë takes all those classic elements, like the creepy Thornfield Hall and that strange laughter in the middle of the night, and she uses them for more than just cheap thrills. She's using them to dig into the dark corners of the human mind and expose the secrets that society desperately wants to keep hidden.
And boy, does this novel have some bombshells. First, there's the attempted bigamy. That was a massive, massive scandal. Then you've got the whole mad woman in the attic, Bertha Mason. Today, a lot of people see her as a symbol of everything Victorian society forced women to suppress, their anger, their desires. And on top of all that, you throw in a scathing critique of the class system and a total takedown of religious hypocrites. Yeah, this book was dynamite.
So, because this book is so packed with complicated, challenging ideas, its meaning has never really been set in stone. It's one of those stories that every generation seems to remake in its own image. And when they adapt it, they're not just retelling Jane's story, they're telling us a lot about themselves.
So let's look at the first adaptations, the stage plays from the 19th century. And what they focused on might actually surprise you. These plays were often for working-class crowds, so they turned the whole thing into a melodrama about class conflict. Rich versus poor, clear heroes and villains. But here's the crazy part. They basically erased Jane's feminism. Her rebellious, independent spirit, gone. It was just too much, too radical for the time.
Then, fast forward to the 20th century, and the movies get a hold of the story. And, surprise, surprise, the focus shifts all over again.
Filmmakers fell head over heels for the Gothic romance side of things. They used all that moody lighting, the fog, the sweeping shots of the moors to really nail that atmosphere. And Jane herself changes depending on the decade. In the 1943 film, she's much more passive and quiet. But by the time you get to the 70s and 90s, filmmakers start to rediscover that rebellious feminist spark, and they really lean into it.
Okay, so this brings us full circle, back to that big question we started with. After all of this, after all of the different versions and analyses, why does this book still hit so hard? Why does it feel so relevant?
And I think the answer is this. Jane Eyre isn't about just one thing. It's not just a romance. It's not just a feminist manifesto. It's not just a critique of the class system. The real magic, the reason it lasts, is in the messy, complicated way all of those things crash into each other.
And you know what? There's a modern word for this that fits perfectly: intersectionality. It's just the idea that you can't separate the different parts of who someone is, their gender, class, race, whatever. They all intersect to create their unique experience. And what's wild is that Charlotte Brontë was totally exploring this idea more than 100 years before anyone even came up with the word.
Just think about the characters. Jane's fight for freedom is all about her being a woman, yes, but it's also about her being poor and having no family. And Bertha Mason, she's not just some mad woman in the attic. The book tells us she's an upper-class Creole woman from Jamaica. Her identity is this super complex mix of gender, race, class, and mental illness. And even Rochester, he starts off as this powerful, rich guy, but he ends the book physically disabled. And that completely changes the power dynamic between him and Jane, finally allowing them to be true equals.
So, after all that, what is Jane Eyre? Is it a love story? Is it a feminist manifesto? Or is it something bigger? A timeless story about the human spirit just demanding freedom and respect no matter what? The true genius of this novel is that it's not just one of those things, it's all of them, all at once. And that right there is why it's still so wonderfully, brilliantly dangerous.